Guys, I reviewed Dirty Work this week, and now I want to do a tribute to Norm Macdonald and talk about just my favorite Norm Macdonald bits, the funniest moments, best of, if you will. This is like the quintessential Norm. If you don't know anything about Norm Macdonald, don't worry, I'm here to help you. I'm sporting the Super Dave Osborne shirt for this event. Hopefully they're in heaven together having a beer and a good laugh together, because Bob Einstein passed away just recently as well. Well, not that recently, probably a year ago. But yeah, let's just go through it. Let's jump in it. What are my favorite Norm moments? So let's start off by talking about his time on SNL. That's how people got to know him. So Norm Macdonald was on SNL, and he was the guy doing Weekend Update, which now it's Colin Jost and Michael Che who do it. But I think Norm Macdonald was the best Weekend Update host. That's even including Chevy Chase, who many refer to Chevy Chase as the best. I think Norm's style lent itself really well to the Weekend Update format. And one of my favorite jokes is he says he's showing car accidents.
Who are safer drivers, men or women? Well, according to a new survey, 55% of adults feel that women are most responsible for minor fender benders, while 78% blame men for most fatal crashes. Please note that the percentages in these pie graphs do not add up to 100% because the math was done by a woman. For those of you hissing at that joke, it should be noted that that joke was written by a woman. So now you don't know what the hell to do. No, I'm just kidding. We don't hire women.
And what people remember Norm for the most as part of that Weekend Update was the number of times he did jokes involving OJ Simpson. Now, an NBC producer told Norm, "Hey, stop doing jokes about OJ Simpson. He's a friend of mine." And people forget that the OJ Simpson trial at the time it was happening, it kind of caused a bit of a race war. Part of the ploy of the lawyers was to divide whites and blacks in order to make it look like OJ Simpson is being on trial just because he's black, and it caused this big race war. So Norm would always do these OJ Simpson jokes, and much to the chagrin of the NBC producers, they kept giving him one more shot, but he kept doing it over and over again, and to the point where it wasn't even funny. It didn't really make sense in the joke. He would just be talking about something randomly and just bring up OJ Simpson. But once you understand that it's because he was told to no longer do OJ Simpson's jokes, then it became funny.
And the Pope came out with a book this week, which contains a series of essays examining faith and morality in today's secular world and the changing role of the Catholic Church as it approaches the 21st century. The book is entitled, "God Himself Told Me That OJ Is Guilty."
And that's what ultimately got Norm Macdonald fired from SNL after, I think he was on the show 3, 4, maybe 5 years. And at that time in SNL, Norm Macdonald got fired, Chris Farley got fired, Adam Sandler got fired. It was like a really weird transitional time in SNL where they just fired the core cast. Chris Rock was another one that got fired. And the period following that is what's considered to be the worst period in SNL history. Funny enough, they got Norm Macdonald to be the host after he got fired, and Norm just went all out. He called out NBC for firing him unjustly.
Then it occurred to me, I haven't gotten funnier. The show has gotten really bad. So, yeah, I'm funny compared to, well, you'll see later. But okay, so let's recap. The bad news is I'm still not funny. The good news is the show blows.
I'm sure NBC was pretty pissed that he said that, which Norm doesn't really give a fuck. I was listening to a podcast where he was talking about what he was planning on doing, And he wanted to just do the monologue at the beginning and then just call it a night and leave in an elevator. Be like, hey, you guys don't find me funny. You don't need me anyway. And just leave in an elevator, which that would have been funny. That was like the start of Norm Macdonald's not give a fuck attitude. Another good moment from that period is when Norm Macdonald was asked to be at the White House Correspondent dinner, which at the time Bill Clinton was the president. And Bill Clinton was very controversial in this period of time because of sexual harassment allegations. And Norm Macdonald called out Bill Clinton at the Correspondent dinner. Now, the Correspondent dinner at the time, they didn't really go that hard after the president. It wasn't until later that it kind of became a roast almost. But Norm Macdonald does this joke where he talks about some woman being appointed in the White House.
In fact, he just nominated Major General Claudia Kennedy as the Army's first female 3-star general. And I think that's great, you know. She's doing a great job. Apparently, the only thing she's having trouble with, she's having difficulty figuring out how to sexually harass herself. She doesn't know how to... What's that? Guy yells my name for no reason.
I thought that joke was brilliant, but more brilliant than the joke itself is the fact that the cameraman cut to Hillary Clinton's face, and she's not having it, ladies and gentlemen. Her face is just stone cold. Ouch! On the topic of Bill Clinton, there's also this appearance by Norm Macdonald on The View, which he constantly shits on The View, and rightfully so. The View is basically the worst show on television, probably ever. But anyway, he's on The View, and he's basically trolling them, and he's saying, hey, remember when Bill Clinton murdered a man?
See, I think we should get the homicide out of the White House and get like a fresh start, because we don't want any more murderers.
I think we should just go on to the next question.
Oh.
Who are the murderers? Yeah.
Oh, Clinton, he murdered a guy.
Yeah, you know, we're not allowed to, you're not allowed to put out accusations without
That's a little too far.
That's the way it does work.
Let's just go on to the next question.
Yeah.
This is not my week. What can I tell you?
Oh, it's not mine either, and I'm being very nice, okay? Be a good boy. Now, Norm.
Do you never hear that?
No. Listen,
No,
we don't need
I
to
don't
talk
want to get
about
into
that.
this, and I don't want to hear it, and this is not the place to make those accusations, and you're supposed to be funny. Let's get on.
And then the producer of that show on The View wanted him to do this stupid bit where his telephone rings mid-interview, and he picks it up and has a funny conversation, and it was obviously going to be a staged thing. But staged is not a term that Norm Macdonald likes. So when he goes to do the gag, he just starts doing it and then just immediately gives up.
Dude, you got a phone ringing.
Oh.
Answer the phone.
Hello? Oh, yeah. Oh, no. The thing is this. There, you know Matt Strauss?
Yeah, the producer.
The producer, he told me it would be funny. He said, like, why don't you carry a cell phone on and then let it ring and then pretend like there's a guy on it?
Is there anybody on it?
No, it's a thing, pretend
You
thing.
know what, Norm? You're a dead man.
Anytime Norm was on The View, it was always very rich. Better than his appearances on The View are probably his appearances on Conan, because Conan kind of understood Norm Macdonald's comedy, and he would just roll with Norm Macdonald, and they had such a good back and forth when Norm would be on the show, and he would go on these long-winded jokes that never had an ending.
When I was young, there was a fella went by the name of Jacques de Gautier. And he was from Témiscamingue, Quebec. And Jacques de Gautier, he was a fella that really thought. And he was smart, you know. He was our hope, I guess. And he was, while I was scrabbling to get out of high school, Jacques Zagatineau had already...
I think you just changed his last name.
Well, you know, a man grows.
But it's not about the punchline itself. It's about the journey to the punchline and catching a glimpse in the mind of Norm Macdonald. Norm was a very intellectual man. He liked wisdom. He was an avid reader. And so was Conan. Conan is a very smart guy, Harvard graduate. So they kind of understood what they were doing. And I think that's why they vibed well together. Norm always had an appreciation for intellect. And speaking of his appreciation for intellect, there's this interview that I loved. And this interview took place, I think, during 2016, during Trump's election and when he was running for president. He basically predicted how comedy is going to change in the Trump era.
Trump oftentimes is doing self-parody, and nothing looks dumber than if you parody self-parody. You know, you really get caught not understanding.
So comedy in the time of Trump, is it more difficult than it was when you were on Saturday Night Live?
It's more difficult in the time of Trump for good comedians, and it's way easier for bad comedians. You know, you don't have a worldview by just saying you don't like Trump. You know what I mean? That doesn't count. Like you can't just say I hate Trump, and that makes you a good person. And the Democrats just can't say I hate Trump, and that means they have a position. You know, that's no position. So for idiots, it's an easier time because you go, well, that guy's the idiot, not me. But if you try to do smart comedy, it's better to stay away from Trump. You know.
I feel like he hit the nail on the head with that comment, and it really is reflective of what comedy has become ever since Trump's presidency. One of Norm's more controversial moments is when he was judging on the TV show Last Comic Standing.
I actually got into an argument on the subway, and the guy quoted the Bible at me. That is not fair. Like, if you get to quote from your favorite book, I should be able to quote from my favorite book, right? He was like, men do not live on bread alone, Matthew 4:4. And it's like, everybody's a little bit magic, Harry Potter, chapter 7.
I disagree. I don't think the Bible joke is brave at all. I think if you're going to take on an entire religion, you should maybe know what you're talking about. J.K. Rowling is a Christian, and J.K. Rowling famously said that if you're familiar with the scriptures, you could easily guess the ending of her book.
Huh? Okay.
And I feel like the way the show was edited, it just made Norm look like an asshole. But once he explained his perspective in a later interview with some magazine, it really made sense. Norm doesn't like handsome, top-of-the-world comics. And that was kind of what was happening at the time of that Last Comic Standing moment, where you had an influx of comedians that were like the witty atheist comedians, people like Bill Maher and Seth MacFarlane and Trevor Noah, and that influx of comedy that's not as funny and it's just more political oriented. Norm's philosophy is that if you're handsome and confident, and that doesn't make for a good humorist. The reason why Norm had so much respect for David Letterman is because Letterman was the complete opposite of that. You had Johnny Carson, which Johnny Carson wasn't as polished as people remember him. But then here comes David Letterman, and he has such an awkward look. He has the tooth gap, the curly Jufro, the little round glasses. He used to have pants that were always too short on him, and the socks were pulled up. He was this very goofy looking guy, and that's what made Letterman successful, in Norm's opinion, and in my opinion as well. It's the fact that he was a bit of the punchline to the joke. He was this clown type of person. No one likes comedy coming from a confident, suave personality. Well, some people do, but Norm didn't like that, and that's not really my cup of tea as well. I much prefer the schlubby kind of comedians. On the topic of David Letterman, he had many good performances on the David Letterman show, but his best has to be the last David Letterman episode where Norm MacDonald is doing stand-up, and he does this brilliant joke about Germany.
There is one country that worries me, though. Not Iraq, not Iran, not North Korea. The only country that really worries me is the country of Germany. I don't know if you guys are history buffs or not, but...
And then there's a really heartfelt moment after that where Norm kind of breaks down. because because David Letterman was one of his heroes growing up in comedy. He's apparently the reason why Norm got into comedy, and Norm got to be on the last David Letterman episode. Norm in his career was always saying that his goal in life was to be on the Johnny Carson show, but unfortunately Johnny Carson retired before Norm got the chance to do that. But I feel like in his heart, this was the next best thing that could happen to him, and he kind of achieved the goal he was setting out to achieve.
I know that Mr. Letterman is not for the mawkish, and he has no truck for the sentimental, but if something is true, it is not sentimental, and I say in truth, I love you. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I remember when Norm Macdonald's Netflix special came out. It was called Hitler's Dog, Gossip, and Trickery. I think that's the title. And when that stand-up happened, I was working at a high school at the time, and me and my coworker, we kept going off on that comedy special. It was one of the funniest specials to us. One bit we always quoted was the bit about Michael Collins.
So how many people that went to the moon do we even know? There was, we know the first ones. There was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. They went Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. And even the third is hard to remember. His name was Michael Collins. And Michael Collins, in one of the just most unfair jokes, I don't know what it was, he got to go all the way to the moon, but not go on the moon. All the way to the moon, and then that little rope ladder, he wasn't allowed to go down. He had to stay in the lunar capsule.
Probably my favorite thing Norm has done. Now, Norm has done some movies, he's done TV shows, but his best work is his YouTube series, which was called Norm Macdonald Live. And he would interview random people. He had Ray Romano on one episode. He had Andy Dick on one episode. He had Mike Tyson on one episode. Just some random people. But what was really unique about that show is it started off like a regular talk show, only a bit more raunchy. But it got to this point where they would read jokes. Now, Norm and his team of writers would write jokes on these cards, and him and the guest would read them out loud. And what was really unique about that segment is that the jokes were anonymous. We don't know which writer, whether it was Norm or one of the other writers. We don't know who wrote the joke. So if a joke bombs, no one's really pointing the finger at anyone. And if a joke is extremely vulgar, they don't know who to blame. Making it that anonymous really makes it so that there's some really edgy comedy in those segments. And the guests wouldn't see the jokes beforehand, so sometimes they would pull up the card and read it, and they would break down laughing as they read it.
That's too dirty. Let's do a nice joke to clean it up.
Opinions are like assholes. Neil Patrick Harris wants to stuff... You should let me read this ahead. Opinions are like assholes. Neil Patrick Harris wants to stuff his cock in them. Oh, wait, that's just assholes.
And sometimes the delivery would completely suck, and Norm would be like, just do it again, do it again. One of my favorite jokes on that segment, now I can't remember who said it, was there was the Netflix documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which was popular at the time.
One of the most popular documentaries on Netflix is Jiro
Dreams of Sushi?
Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
I've seen that. It's very good.
That's a fantastic documentary. One of the least popular documentaries, Jiro Nightmares of Asteroid.
Oh, yeah.
Adam Egget was the co-host on that show, and he was always the butt of jokes. Whenever he would fuck up, people would like poke fun at him and stuff like that. And it was such a good foil to Norm on that show and on the Netflix series that would come after it.
Michelle Obama has booked a cameo on the ABC show Nashville.
Start again.
All right. Kids today, I mean...
You can't spell ABC.
Wow.
Because of that YouTube series and how popular it was, YouTube was trying to do this award show that was basically the Oscars, but for YouTubers. So who did they invite to host? Norm Macdonald. Well, that was a bit of a bad idea. Because Norm Macdonald is a professional troll. So they have Norm Macdonald with this comedian called Jenny Slate, who I've seen in so many movies, but just don't understand the appeal, to be honest. And there's this other guy with them. And Norm is just trolling the whole night. Everyone's wearing suits except for Norm. He's wearing like a sweatshirt with sweatpants. It's just so funny to watch. There's this point where Norm is interviewing Andy Samberg, and the conversation goes into, if you can go in the past, would you kill Hitler?
Akiva wrote a one-act play.
God damn, I wish I had a time machine
to see that action.
Yeah, no, to take back my question.
Thought you were going to say to murder Hitler.
I would not. You know, people always fucking want to murder Hitler with their time machine, right? But then I feel if I got back there, I'd be afraid of falling under the spell of his fucking beautiful eyes.
It's true. You
and
want
oratory, and
be
then,
locked in the gaze.
yeah, and then I join the fucking party,
That's
knowing
his
me.
thing. He gives you his full attention. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe there's
Norm,
something to this guy.
No, but before you ask another serious
Believe
question,
it or
we
not,
gotta
they're
move
telling
on.
us to wrap it up. I don't exactly know why you guys.
This is fun for everyone.
It's the
For the
Lonely
record,
Island, guys.
I would have killed Hitler. So thanks, gentlemen.
There's also another point in that show where Norm calls out a YouTube commenter called Barfy Man.
We've been called everything so many times.
That's the
I
right
think
way to
the
do it.
last
Oh,
comment I read
are
was
you
the
guys
guy-
talking about Barfy Man 362?
Exactly.
Is that you?
No, that's that motherfucker. I don't even want to give him attention, but you know, listen, you know, saying those kind of things about me.
Talk to him. Talk to him right now. Talk to Barf.
Listen, Barfy Man 362.
right.
No, you cannot rape my mother with a knife.
Well, we're really happy for you guys, and we really, really like you, and have fun this evening.
So after the success of that Norm Macdonald live show, Netflix acquired the rights to it, and he later did a Netflix show. I didn't like the Netflix show as much as I did like the interview. It was less raunchy, and you can't make it as raunchy as you were doing it on YouTube because of obvious reasons. Obvious reasons later coming to bite him in the ass. So Norm was promoting this Netflix show that he did. He had great guests like M. Night Shyamalan, and Jane Fonda was one of the guests, and Chevy Chase. It was actually a really interesting show, just not as funny as the YouTube series. But anyway, so Norm Macdonald was promoting it, and this was around the time Roseanne was getting canceled for her tweets. And Norm made some comments kind of along the lines of, I put her in touch with Louis C.K. because they're both going through similar things and no one else is going through that, so I thought it was important to have them talk to one another, which is a very thoughtful thing about Norm. Norm was very non-judgmental. If someone fucked up, look, we all kind of fuck up sometimes, you know? I'm sure you can go in my YouTube videos and find shit that I said that was a little off color. But Norm was very empathetic of Roseanne's situation, and he was very close with Roseanne. He was a writer on Roseanne's show. Anyway, people didn't like the fact that he was defending Roseanne, and good on him for sticking by his friend and being a good, courageous friend in that situation. So he had to go on Howard Stern and apologize for defending Roseanne Barr. People took some of his comments out of context and said that he was dismissing the fact that the victims went through a lot and yada yada yada. And as he was apologizing on Howard Stern, he dropped the term Down syndrome as a derogatory term. And now Norm was stuck. He was supposed to later go on Jimmy Fallon, but apparently people working at Jimmy Fallon's show started crying at the thought of Norm appearing, which, come on, guys. Seriously? You're crying over that shit? Jeez, I feel like people have nothing to cry about these days. But anyway, the staff was crying because Norm was going to appear on Jimmy's show. Jimmy, being a bit of the guy who tries to appeal to everyone, kind of didn't take his friend's defense. Norm decided to go on The View to apologize. Now, Norm has been shitting constantly on The View. Even on Norm Macdonald Live, The View was always the butt of every joke.
Barbara Walters announced that she's retiring from The View. Well, actually, she announced it 5 years ago, but no one could hear her over those yammering bitches. See?
He goes on The View, and what he did, I think his appearance on The View is probably the best thing he's ever done. I think that was the funniest shit ever. So he goes on The View, and instead of like just giving a half-assed apology, he pretends to be 100% sincere, and he even does like the little voice cracking, like, I don't know if I could ever be forgiven for what I've done. The hosts on The View don't really get that he's like 100% sarcastic, so they keep rolling with it to the point where they start feeling bad for Norm. And if you watch it on screen, they probably couldn't see it in person, but when you watch it on screen, there would be these little moments where Norm would break character and he'd be like, I'm so apologetic. Then he would sarcastically pop a mint in his mouth.
That moment that probably
I
offended
realized at that moment that I'd done something unforgivable.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, it's like things spill out.
And as he's apologizing, he would slip some lines that are just so stupid and so exaggerated, yet they take the comments at face value.
Like, reporters always ask you, like, what's offensive? Is anything over the line? And I personally think almost everything is over the line.
They like you to be edgy, and then when you are...
His appearance on The View, his last appearance on The View, is probably the smartest thing I've ever seen a comedian do ever. Because you see comedians, like, as much as I love Patrice O'Neal, he would go on shows where people hated him, and he would just roast them, which is all entertaining in its own right. But Norm was operating on such a different level and was so, like, 3D chess that I don't even know what to think of it. I saw it the first time, and I just had to loop it over and over again, and I'm like, this is such an interesting performance Norm is doing. Towards the end of his career, Norm was doing this series during the quarantine called Quarantined, and I didn't really like it at first because the production value was so low that I had a tough time understanding what was going on. But it's basically Norm on the phone with his friends, calling his friends during the pandemic. But I feel like Norm kind of knew that his days were numbered, and that show is basically him saying goodbye to his friends unofficially, which I was never really into the show, but for the sake of this video I thought I'd revisit it, and there's a total new added meaning to that conversation. And there's all these resurfaced clips going around the internet. One of them is Norm doing a bit about cancer, saying, I don't know why people say he lost to cancer. The cancer died with him. It's a draw. That one's resurfacing everywhere. And there's also one where Norm is talking about the movie The Straight Story with, what's that actor's name? Farnsworth? Something Farnsworth?
Like I saw a one-woman show once by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And,
just one?
Yeah, only one. And she was like, well, my mother had breast cancer, you know, and now I have breast cancer. And I'm like, well, it's everybody. Like, they think it's so special when everyone gets cancer and dies. Like, that's not
great. What if we just ended the podcast?
But you know, it's almost like the height of narcissism to think that you're going to you know, you're going to be so brave as to talk about it in person,
right?
Whereas all you're doing is just garnering sympathy for yourself.
Most comedians fear bombing. Norm Macdonald didn't fear bombing. If the joke made him laugh, then that's all what mattered. Which he's very similar to Patrice O'Neal in that way. Patrice O'Neal being my other favorite stand-up comedian. They just say what they want to say, and if it's funny, good. If it's not funny, too bad. I feel like that's what made Norm Macdonald brave. And especially looking at the Norm Macdonald live show, those jokes were very edgy. They were extremely edgy. He would joke about rape, he would joke about Hitler, and that show came out in 2013, I believe, which is around the time cancel culture started emerging. So for him to do that, it's a pretty ballsy move. There's a reason why people are looking back fondly at Norm Macdonald. It's because of that bravery. I've never seen someone have such a not give a fuck attitude, which is really admirable from my perspective because I'm an artist at the end of the day. I have a YouTube channel. I make a couple of short films here and there. And sometimes I feel like, is what I'm doing over the line? Am I crossing a boundary? And Norm Macdonald is just a reminder that art has no boundaries. If something has malicious intent, then people can smell that from a mile away. But if you have good intent, and if you're funny, and if you're at the end of the day an honest and genuine and caring person, people don't care about what you're making as long as the intent is there. Norm was a reminder of that, and I feel like the more time goes on and the more cancel culture evolves, the less people are looking at the intent of the artist, and it's just becoming the words at face value. And I feel like there's kind of a hole in comedy right now of who's gonna take Norm's place. Who's the other comedian who would just say whatever is on his mind and not give a fuck about what the outcome was because he knows deep down in his heart he's a kind, caring person. There's a hole missing in comedy for that. So good news for you is if you're watching and you're a stand-up comedian or thinking of becoming a stand-up comedian, there's a slot that's open. There's a big gaping hole that's open for you to slip in. All of those really cutting edge comedians, in my opinion, like Norm passed away, Patrice passed away, Louis C.K. got canceled and is kind of off the radar. Roseanne Barr got canceled, and it's kind of a scary time for the art form of comedy. Once Netflix grew, stand-up comedy grew with it because it was a new outlet for stand-up comedians, and it was very cheap for Netflix to produce a stand-up special. But now Netflix has become so big that stand-up comedy is not as profitable a program as it used to be. So are they going to take the chance on having a stand-up comedy routine that's very edgy? I'm not sure, and I'm a little worried. His passing makes me reflect on these things. I want to see comedy return to its edginess, and I feel like all the comedy I see these days is very tame. Like John Oliver, I like what he does. I like that he's making youth more politically aware and giving his opinion on things, but he's not really funny in my opinion. Trevor Noah's not funny. James Corden's not funny. There's a few stand-up comedians that I still like. I still like Bill Burr, and I like Dave Chappelle. But there are fewer and fewer, is what I'm saying. So yeah, I don't know where we go from here, folks. It's gonna be an interesting next 5 years. Hopefully, now that Trump is no longer president, people can get their stick out of their ass a little more. But yeah, everyone, just send prayers to Norm's family. I hope they're doing well. Yeah, we lost a very unique voice, and he will never be forgotten.